else saying, why are you so opposed to proxy voting? I feel like you're an in-person person, Jen. I feel like you would say you got to be there in person to vote.
Yeah, I think that can be important, voting in person. And it's interesting that this congresswoman has all this time to do these news hits and these media hits about how she really needs to do proxy voting because she has a baby. It seems incongruent to the fact that she needs to proxy vote. Like, it's a good way to get attention, I guess. But I don't. The problem is he doesn't have any margin of error to like punish his members for misbehaving.
Now, are the people who got elected last week, are they already in? Did they swear? Are they ready to go?
That's a really good question. I don't know that they are.
Okay.
But because the election results have to get certified. I don't know. Let me ask Grok or something. I can get back to you on that.
Right, because I'm thinking that, that's really
that
where
would give him two more cushions.
Yeah, that's really where we started to lose our margin is when Trump started plucking people out of Congress.
Yeah, Gates.
Yeah, to...
Now, Stefanik's staying, right?
She had to,
she
basically.
Has to, yeah.
So, that makes it really tough for any sort of budget decisions. And, I think what we've heard all along is that the Senate and the House are not on the same page, John, right? I mean, it's been a struggle.
Not by a long shot.
And so where do you think we end up? You think we end up in a huge budget fight, or you think everyone stands in line? I mean, the nice part about the budget, y'all, I've been thinking about this, even if it is a fight, it takes the talk away from the tariffs.
It's a good point. Good point. You know what? And it's going to be. I think it's going to be another one. We're going to take it right to the brink again with the budget talks, and then at the 11.5 hour, they settle up with at least a temporary one. I think the voters out there get a little tired of it after a while.
They're both sworn in.
Okay.
Congressman Jimmy Patronis and Randy Fine from Florida were elected April 1st, sworn in on April 2nd, and they've already delivered their first floor speeches.
Okay. Well, that's good. Then that gives us
a little more wiggle room for Speaker Mike Johnson.
A little bit. And it is being reported that apparently he and Anna Paulina Luna reached some sort of compromise on the proxy petition. She had this discharge petition and was kind of, going around the rules to try to get a vote on this. And it sounds like they've been talking and maybe coming to some terms. So that would be important because we're going to need everyone on the same team for the budget fight, I think.
Yeah. And, there's probably a good reason for him to push back on this because if you look at the pandemic, it was the Democrats were loving the work from home stuff and the proxy voting and everything else. And so there's probably a good reason to have people in the building for their votes.
Because they would all want to be out on the streets protesting Elon, like apparently a lot of people were over the weekend here in Columbia, across the state. But that was
what is the deal with all the boomers out there? Why was it all boomers protesting all weekend?
Well, I think, proxy voting would allow your congresspeople to be on the street protesting.
Yeah, they're certainly in that age group.
Placing their votes during the breaks, I guess. All right, well, we're going to get to Pam Bondi's comments on the federal judges and the lawfare currently plaguing Trump. We are also going to be talking to Scott Vaughn at 7:10, so you're going to want to stay tuned.
170 lawsuits filed against us. That should be the constitutional crisis right there. 50 injunctions. They're popping up every single day, trying to control his executive power, trying to control where he believes our tax dollars should be allocated.
Pam Bondi yesterday on the Sunday show saying this is the real constitutional crisis. We can't get anything done because everything's tied up in court. But Trump chalked up a pretty big win on Friday, Jen.
He did. It was historic. I talked about this at length on my show yesterday. Josh Hawley tweeted on Friday, "This is extremely important. For the first time, the Supreme Court halts liberal judges' lawless efforts to avoid any appellate review by recasting their injunctions as temporary restraining orders. Today, the Supreme Court finally said no. They did so by a 5-4 decision. We had Amy Coney Barrett joining the other conservatives. Justice Roberts voted no. But what was happening was they sued to say, no, you can't halt all these grants that were going out to different things to fund new teacher programs and trainings because they had halted them because they said you haven't complied with our new DEI rules where you can't be using our federal money on unconstitutional and unlawful DEI trainings and practices. And the judge is like, nope, you still have to send the money out. Even though they couldn't prove that they could have recouped the money, they refused to post a bond or anything. So the Supreme Court finally said this is acting like an injunction, so it is reviewable, and we are stopping it. And that's the first time they've done that. And I think that's significant because you see Senator Josh Hawley filing his nationwide Injunction Abuse Prevention Act. This has been a big talking point on the right and even on the left because, like, under George W. Bush, we only had 6 national injunctions. Obama, we had 12. 64 we had during Trump's first term. 14 total for 4 years under Biden. And in Trump's first month alone, there were 15 already national injunctions affecting non-parties. And Hawley's like, enough. And he's filed legislation. Now, I don't think he can get 60 votes to approve it, but I'm going to have him on my show this Sunday talking about this very important topic.
Good.
But it is a signal from the court, at least 5 of them, that they're recognizing that there is, like you said, a constitutional crisis in the works here because the courts don't have armies to enforce these things. And if they're just seizing Trump's executive power, which they don't have and they're not supposed to be wielding, and basically overriding him on all kinds of numbers of issues, including, you know, whether they can deport Trinidad people and ordering mid-flight, you know, turnarounds and stuff like that, it becomes very problematic.
It's really interesting. And of course, the Democrat lawyers are smart, right? And so they shop around to try to get the right judge.
We do too.
We do too.
Yeah.
But you hear
like
a lot
we
of
kept
times
filing everything in that one district in Texas because they only had one judge and he was with us. And so like everything got filed down there.
And you hear the same judges, although we have, you know, lots and lots of federal judges, you seem to hear the same names again and again because that's because the Democrats are picking their favorite judge. And I heard.
And then when it affects the entire country, that's troubling. And when they're pretending like a TRO, as you know, is supposed to be a temporary restraining order. It's an emergency thing to halt and preserve the status quo for like 10 to 15 days total. And then you have a hearing on the preliminary injunction. That can be reviewable, but the TRO hasn't been. But they've been like framing what they're doing, which are basically preliminary injunctions, as temporary restraining orders to evade appellate review. And the Supreme Court this time is like, I have it printed out in my purse if you want to read it. Or it's like, nope, not this time. And so it shows a willingness to be monitoring the district courts. And I think it's an encouraging sign.
And perhaps sends, a signal to other judges who are thinking about issuing these nationwide injunctions. I've mentioned here, I think it was during Trump's first term, Jen, that you and I sat through an hour-long presentation in D.C. at the Federalist Society conference about nationwide injunctions. It's been, you know, especially since, you know, Trump's been in office, it's been a huge discussion. I think the other thing I heard, and this might be a little bit of a conspiracy theory, but I thought it was an interesting perspective, is that judges are, these liberal judges are maybe incentivized to make these national headlines and to try to be the guy or gal who, you know, puts Trump in his place because, of course, Trump's not going to be the president forever. And hey, maybe your name moves up the list for a higher judgeship if you're the one that puts a stop to Trump. And so they are also incentivized, to kind of be like the liberal warrior or savior or whatever. And, you want
to be fair, that happens on the right, too. We had some of these judges writing some blockbuster opinions during the pandemic when Biden had stuff shut down or different other things. And I'm like, wow, they're obviously a shining star, and this is going to get them attention when they're looking at if there's an appellate court spot opening or even Supreme Court.
And certainly in some of these disputes, those judges kind of become household names because you hear about them so much in the press, which could help them in the future, although some of them are household names for not so great reasons.
Yeah, especially the ones in the Trump prosecutions.
The other thing I was watching is the legislature is back in today. They have, I think it's 5 weeks left. Gosh, it seems like it's flown by.
The Missouri legislature?
Yes.
Did you see that they perfected in the House this bill that would triple the amount of time for early voting?
No.
Yeah, I'm like, the Senate needs to stop that post haste because, as you and I know from being in Wisconsin last week, they used brilliantly these early voting windows in order to harvest their votes, and they're better at it than we are. And that's all we need in Missouri is for them to triple the amount of time that they have to harvest ballots and get those to the ballot box.
I think that's DOA in the Senate. That early voting
it got perfected in the House. Isn't that significant? It's attached to the presidential preference primary, which is very popular because the caucuses were such a cluster. But the thing is, I'm fine if you want to have a presidential preference primary. I don't think it's a waste of money. Gary Nolan disagrees with me on this, but I think it's fine to have so everyone can participate. But get that decoupled from this tripling of the early voting. That is just a Democrat dream, and I'm very troubled by that.
That seems like a very unfair trade because if you know the history of how we got early voting, it was a pretty significant trade in the bill where we got photo ID.
Yeah.
And those two things are tied together. And Republicans said,
now
okay.
the nose is under the tent.
Yeah.
We need to be vigilant and not allow that.
And I think people are excited about early voting because I think it went well. It went well for us.
I think 2 weeks is great. I think 6 weeks is an invitation for trouble, and it's an invitation for money from other sources to come into our state to get the Democrat ballots to our ballot boxes.
I think you're right.
Just with our little municipal election with not a lot on the ballot in Cole County, heard from the Cole County clerk, and he saw 400 early ballots cast as of, I guess, Friday.
That's a pretty big deal. Of course, we'll be talking to Boone County Clerk Brianna Lennon at 8:10 and get an update from her.
But we saw Milwaukee Central Count last week when we were there for the RNLA for their big election, which we lost by 10 points. They had historic numbers. The Democrats put up the same kind of numbers in Milwaukee that they had during the presidential election in terms of early votes, mailed-in ballots.
It was crazy. And our guy lost, but he had
more
raw
votes.
numbers. Yeah.
He had more votes than the Democrat in 2023 judge that had won by 11 points. He had more votes than that candidate. So he should have been the victor, but they were just so much better at getting those early votes in and getting those ballots mailed in that he lost by 10 points. So that's why I'm like, let's not play with fire here and let's stop this while we can, but still going through the legislative process. So that's on my to-do list this week, is to figure out what senator to contact about this and try to get that stopped.
Well, maybe it will get stopped anyway because there's a new process apparently in one of the rules committee. Did you see this? The bingo process.
Fun.
It is fun.
Do you get daubers? Do you stamp your bills?
I don't think there were daubers, and I don't think there was any money involved, but Scott Cups last week showed up in his rules committee with the bingo wheel and seems rather frustrated with the speaker because apparently there's another rules committee and the Senate bills that are coming over are going to that other rules committee, and he has all these House bills. So he said, I've got 20 House bills or something like that, and I've got 0 Senate bills. I'm only going to do 5 House bills for every 1 Senate bill I get. And because I like a lot of these bills and I don't like some of them, we're just going to use the bingo wheel to decide which 5 bills get heard in committee today.
So did you only do bingo balls numbered with the numbers of the bills, or did you have to fill a bingo card out?
He must have. And so I think, folks who showed up for that hearing expecting their bill to be heard and then him only taking 5, I'm sure there's some frustration there. I believe his committee is set to meet again today. And they're
doing all kinds of crazy stuff with props down there. They broke the gavel too, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. Yep.
Who broke that gavel? Do we have any
Lincoln
information?
Huff, I think, broke the gavel.
Was he mad?
I don't know.
What was the deal there?
Being forceful.
But things are heating up, certainly. With 5 weeks left, they still got to do the House has sent over the budget, so now it's in the Senate's hands. That's the only thing constitutionally that they have to get done. But there are a lot of other items and priorities that we've talked about with folks on this show that they're wanting to get done this session, and a lot of big ones. You've got, some people are still talking about IP reform. You've got abortion. You've got some of these tax breaks. You've got a lot of different, this election bill, apparently. So
also open enrollment, which has made some progress, and that would be a huge coup if that gets done.
Yes. And then, talks about the foundation formula that's going to come up with the budget. And I think as that discussion happens, you're going to hear more about education reform. So we've got a lot on the table. But next, I think we have to talk about producer Drake making an ESPN appearance.
How about that?
This weekend. All right. That's up next on Wake Up Missouri.
This is Wake Up.
have one. You can pull the controllers off, dock it on your TV, and play it like a console.
Yeah,
and
it's
for
great.
everyone who like grew up in the era, which was me, of the Super Nintendo, like Mario Kart and all of the like those games, they had them all.
Space Invaders.
It was so fun. So I was interested in this.
Yeah,
and I'm
they
sad
had that
it's-
Animal Kingdom. What was that? Animal Farm or Animal
Yeah.
Kingdom? What was that thing where like all the celebrities were even playing it?
Oh,
where you're
yeah.
like picking apples and taking care of your house and stuff like that.
Speaking of COVID, Matt's weighing in. He said, I rushed to order all of my materials to build a shop that I've been planning for 2 years after my supplier told me costs could go up 20 to 30%. He said, I didn't want to end up in the same position as everyone trying to build during COVID. You can weigh in too on our Facebook page, but stay tuned because Scott Vaughn is going to talk state legislative items next.
Broadcasting live from the Zimmer Communications World Headquarters. This is Wake Up Missouri with Stephanie Bell, the Zimmer News Team, and your host, Randy Tobler.
I am Stephanie Bell, in for Randy Tobler this morning. He returns tomorrow. I am joined by guest co-host Jennifer Bukowski, attorney and host of the Jennifer Bukowski Show, which airs Sunday mornings on the Eagle. Of course, you can also hear her on Gary Nolan, on Tuesdays, Jen, right?
Yep, Tuesday, 10:30. And I'll be back here as you on Friday.
Awesome. A lot of Jen time this week, so make sure you tune in. But now we are joined, like we are every Monday morning, with Scott Fawn of the Missouri Times. And this week in Missouri politics, I had a chance to catch up on your show yesterday, Scott, and I noticed you had Senator Curtis Trent on, and you were talking about this bill that cleared the Senate to eliminate, or I guess phase out, the capital gains tax. There's a huge fiscal note on that, and I know the budget is coming up in the Senate. Are they going to have a problem if they keep cutting, and want to keep spending?
Well, I mean, yes. In Washington, they just borrow money from China. But in the state of Missouri, you have to have a balanced budget. So I think you've seen, there's been a lot of games played with this. You hear everybody that, I always say, if someone says the swamp, they probably have the wettest feet in town. You have a lot of folks who talk about the swamp who will give you essentially fake numbers. I don't say they lie to you, but in real life, this would be considered a lie, and tell you the state budget is bigger and all these things. But it's one-time money from Washington that they're still spending. The state right now is operating at a deficit. And so, look, here's the thing. If you want a capital gains cut, which I think actually might make sense, I think as the Republican Party is starting to have a bit of a problem here. They've had the majority for 25 years, supermajority for going on 15, supermajority plus the governor for going on 10, and the state hasn't grown. They've cut taxes from 6 to 4. But the state has not grown. And I think that is something folks are going to start, not just ideological folks that live their head in the clouds, but in reality, people are going to start to ask, okay, at what point do we see growth here? We keep cutting taxes and doing things that folks promise growth if we do. We're just not seeing the growth. So maybe the capital gains cut's a different angle from the income tax to try to see if maybe that would be the thing that actually saw any growth. Because I do think reasonable people are going to start asking the question, is this working? When do we actually see some success?
But Scott, do you think that higher taxes would lead to more growth? Because that is not what they're seeing in New York and California. They're seeing people flee those high tax states.
I don't think Missouri is a high tax state now. I don't know that it's really fair to compare Missouri's current tax situation to to New York or Illinois.
Well, you're
I think
saying
a lot of those
that
folks.
You're implying that cutting taxes is not leading to growth, and I'm just asking you.
No, I'm saying the statistics say they're not. It's not. I mean, we lost a member of Congress. I'm saying that, frankly, we've cut taxes essentially from 6 on the way to 4. I love tax cuts. I'm for all of them. I think they're great. However, I do think at some point we're going to have to start seeing some growth with this state, or they're going to start asking the question: is this the right tax to cut, or how we
Well, I think the income tax is the great. I'm on board with Kehoe cutting that to 0, because if you're going to compete against Tennessee and Texas and Florida, you're not going to get businesses to move to a state that has income taxes.
Well, I think it's kind of hard to compare Missouri to Texas and Florida. I mean, they have oil.
In Tennessee, they're very comparable.
And then Tennessee, I think, is the best comparison, but they have pretty high property taxes. There's high fees for things.
Those are lower than ours.
Well, I think their sales tax is higher. I mean, I don't know if the revenue is any different in Tennessee. They're just collecting in a different way. Maybe we need to do that. Maybe we need to take the Tennessee model and collect revenue differently. But I don't think anybody in Tennessee would tell you there's no taxes. It's just collected in a different manner. Maybe we copy that. I just think right now, at some point, well, let me just ask you, what year or what tax rate will we actually see growth in this state?
Well, I definitely think you'd see it if we had 0 state income tax, because then we'd be competitive.
It has to get totally to 0 before you see any growth.
I'm not saying before you see any growth, but just to get businesses to move here, to get people to want to move here, you're going to pick a state with 0 state income tax over one that has an income tax.
So you get no growth at 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, but you get all the growth at 0.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, hopefully you get some as you lower it. But I think 0 is the goal, and that's what Governor Kehoe's goal is.
I think that's a great goal. I just think, if you should see some growth as you move down this ladder. I question whether you have to get all the way to zero to see any growth if you're actually going to see growth at all. But I'm a pessimistic German. I just think the statistic, the scoreboard, it's like Ollie Marmol. You can come up with all the mathematical theories and stuff, but the scoreboard says we're terrible. And
Scott,
in Missouri, we're not growing, which is not what you want to do. You want to grow.
Scott, I got a question about it. I think there's some confusion on behalf of voters out there because we're hearing, we saw the Missouri House pass their bill that would repeal the mandated sick leave and maybe future minimum wage increases after the voters passed Prop A. I think there's a lot of confusion out there about the difference between a proposition and a constitutional amendment, especially as lawmakers going back to the drawing board. Could you maybe elaborate on that for folks?
Yes, a constitutional amendment really is not that much harder to get on the ballot than a proposition, but the effects are very different. Proposition is just a statute, just like the legislators pass statutes. If the public passes a statute, then the legislature can change it. In the past, the legislature has been very willing to change things. The puppy mill thing comes to mind if it's in statute, which is why in Missouri we have a terrible practice of putting everything in the Constitution. Things legislators won't address or can't address or aren't whatever, like sports betting, common sense things. The public ultimately goes to the ballot and put things in the Constitution. That's why bingo's in the Constitution and marijuana and so on and so forth. The legislature can't come in and change the will of the voters with a constitutional amendment. They can just put one back on the ballot, where a proposition is quite easy for them to change, and they've been quite willing to do so.
Again, Scott Vaughn is our guest. He is the publisher of Missouri Times. He is live with us here on Wake Up Missouri. Scott, I was at the Boone County Lincoln Days covering it on Thursday evening in mid-Missouri. Andrew Bailey, our Attorney General, was the keynote speaker, and he got just a thunderous applause on a couple of lines, including one where he urged people to vote in this the Columbia elections coming up tomorrow on Tuesday. How would you grade the job that General Bailey is doing overall as Attorney General, A, and B? He got about 60% of the vote in November against Elad Gross. Does Mr. Gross have a future in the Democratic Party? Because he's pretty well known.
I mean, is there a future in the Democratic Party right now? I mean, I like Elad, but I don't see a serious statewide contender on the Democrat side. I mean, they're looking for Pyrrhic and moral victories, right? Spirit wins. I like Elad, young man. But he should go find himself a state legislative seat that's actually winnable. Because continuing to run for statewide office, it doesn't matter how well known you are. The Democrat Party has chosen some constituencies that actually not only don't exist in Missouri in large numbers, make the mass of people not want to mess with them. And frankly, a lot of it's social issues. The trans stuff is just something in this state. Folks aren't going to sit still. And they think if you don't have sense enough to figure out there's a man and there's a woman, they don't really want to listen to you on everything else. And I think until the Democrats, it's going to have to be the Republicans have become more Washington focused. The Democrats are extremely Washington focused, always have been. They've always been a bottom down party. And until the folks at the top of that party decide they care about valuing work, Jay Nixon once told me, when the Democrats run on valuing work and labor, we win. If we talk about any other thing else under the sun, we lose. And I think that's so true in Missouri. And he is the Babe Ruth of Missouri politics. Every second Democrat's been not valuing work. I think they had no hope of competing in the state of Missouri. Elad Gross or whoever else you want to line up.
Now, I've seen a lot of strange things in Jefferson City, but I'm not sure I've ever seen a bingo wheel or whatever you want to call that cage in a hearing room before. For those who missed it earlier, Scott Cupps brought a bingo wheel. He said he's only going to hear 5 House bills for every 1 Senate bill he gets. He seemed frustrated that he wasn't being referred any Senate bills. He's got another hearing today. Are we going to see the bingo wheel, and what's the fallout from this political stunt?
Well, it's like everything in politics. It's all personal and all goes back a little ways. He wanted to be the vice chairman of the budget committee very badly and thought he should be. Speaker Patterson decided to put Bishop Davidson, a close ally of himself, in that job. Scott Cupps did not like that. Lots of his colleagues, frankly, did not like that. And not that they thought Scott should get it, they thought they should be vice chair of budget, or their friend should be. So he introduced a bunch of bills before spring break to name some bridges and some highways after Bishop Davidson in a move that was done very clever and very funny. And I think it was hard to be mad at him because it was so clever the way he went about it. It was very funny. However, the bingo wheel, that's where the fallout's going to lie. I think it goes from, kind of a tongue-in-cheek, funny quip to, you don't really want to make decisions, on government, on legislation, on how they move forward with that. Number one, there's not that many Senate bills. And number two, I think the Speaker is sending them to Brenda Shields' Rules Committee because he's not quite sure what Scott's going to do next.
So if you're Speaker Patterson, why wouldn't you just remove Cups and put someone else in there? I mean, is that where we're headed?
Well, that is a question every single House member I've talked to scratches their head. Because this is, one was definitely a sign of disrespect to the Speaker. This is a elevated, more antagonistic sign of disrespect. So, if he comes back out with a wheel today, it wouldn't surprise me to see Speaker Patterson remove him. And I don't think you'd see very many of his colleagues upset by it.
And Scott, I just add this. You mentioned he wants to name, he's being sarcastic about it because he's so frustrated, but Cups folks wants to rename the Missouri State Fair as the Bishop Davidson Fair and the Katy Trail as the Bishop Davidson Trail. These are two very powerful Republicans in Southwest Missouri and a Republican speaker. They can't blame the Democrats for this, and Cups is clearly sending a message to the Speaker. I mean, that's pretty. I've never seen anything like this.
Well, I thought the State Fair, the Katy Trail thing was kind of clever and funny, and I think everybody else thought that was kind of clever. I think that yes, it was a shot at the Speaker, but it was so well done that he would have looked petty to respond in something that was that kind of cute. It doesn't really affect anything. But now that you're seeing the legislative process truly usurped in a total sign of disrespect, I think the Speaker's going to have to handle it. Or, other people are going to decide, okay, this is the way to make movers, and his problem will get worse.
I feel bad for the person 20 years from now researching, and they're like going through the bills for this year, and they don't know the history, thinking, what in the world is going on here? All right. We will continue to watch that and talk with Scott Fawn next week. Thanks so much for joining us, Scott.
Yes, ma'am. See you then.
Scott.
All right. Up next, we are going to be making Missouri healthy again.
You're listening to Wake Up Missouri.
Bukowski this morning, and we are, without Randy, still going to try to make Missouri healthy again. And if you suffer from this like I do, you're going to want to listen up. I think it's pronounced misophonia. Misophonia, John, do you know what this is?
I do not.
When life's noises drive you mad. According to the internet, it's when certain sounds trigger unusually strong emotions. And for many people, this is kind of the chewing, the eating, the mouth noises. People get this from that, and it does. It completely drives me mad. I hate it, and I know a lot of other folks are triggered by this as well. Are you triggered by this, Drake?
No. I make too many noises to be distracted by that.
Yes, we know. No, okay. So the other thing that I think a lot of us have one of these people.
I don't like slurping. Apparently,
Slurping.
that's a common trigger. Chewing or slurping, pen clicking, lip smacking, breathing or sniffing, tapping or repetitive sounds.
Oh, I can't stand tapping or repetitive sounds. Ugh, it drives me nuts. Like in the car with kids when they're just like fidgeting. Not for me. Well, a lot of people, John. Well, I know a lot of us have someone like this in our lives, and I'm here to help you try to fix it because the other thing that bothers me, folks who can't stop clearing their throats. You have one of those people in your life, right? They're just like,
Missouri Governor Joe Teasdale was famous for
really?
that. He was terrible for, he'd say a sentence and then he'd clear his throat. Oh, yeah, big time.
Well, they say that this could be due to a medical condition, some sort of basically silent reflux. So if that is you and it's bothering you, then maybe you need to go get checked out by an ear, nose, and throat specialist. But they also said it can kind of develop as a habit, and it's actually dangerous for your vocal cords. Apparently, it slams your vocal folds together, which can lead to lesions, nodules, bruising, and hemorrhages. So if this is someone in your life or you should really get it checked out. But they also offer some other remedies. They say oftentimes people are just, and this is allergy season, right? So they say a lot of people are just like, oh, it's just allergies. But they said really oftentimes there's other things going on. So you should get checked out. But then also they said just staying hydrated is a really important way to keep, first identify the root cause, but then you can stay hydrated. And they said there's actually exercises like swallowing, humming, sipping water, or blowing air that can help the throat begin to heal so that you don't have this. And they said also people who clear their throat a lot, they get a little bit self-conscious and then they kind of have stress about it and it makes it worse. And this sounds like, I mean, John, you could name one person off the top of your head that you knew, like, yes, absolutely. There's somebody who does this all the time.
Well, for your misophonia, do you want to hear some treatments for that ear condition there, Stephanie? Sound therapy or noise-canceling headphones, cognitive behavioral therapy, or avoidance or coping strategies like asking people to chew with their mouths closed or just avoiding crunchy snacks altogether.
Yes, I oftentimes remove myself from the situation if it makes sense, but you can't wear noise-canceling headphones at dinner, Jen. I do think like that's why...
Well, my kids try to. They're sneaking their AirPods in all the time, it feels like.
Really? Well, I think, I think one thing, though, that's why you hear a lot of, like, music in restaurants. I will sometimes, like, play music during a dinner or something to try to, like, drown out some of that sound.
Is that why you're doing that?
And they say also there's some sort of new headphone that, like, allows you to hear, but, like, is essentially, like, a small white noise. So people who really suffer from
the
this...
AirPods have a setting for that.
Yeah, but then you can't hear what people are saying.
Well, you have noise canceling, and then there's also like a hearing aid component. I don't know. I've read something on that. I'll look it up.
Okay. Well, if you are suffering from misophonia or suffering from throat clearing, hopefully you are on the road to recovery after today's minute of making Missouri healthy again.
And sane.
That's right.
And if
sane.
not, we'll refer you to Randy.
All right, we are going to get back into those Facebook comments of what you are panic buying before these tariffs come in, and we'll hear some of the Trump administration's defense of the tariffs when we come back next.
taking steroids. Outside looks great. You know, you're muscular. Inside, you're killing your vital organs. Yeah. That's what was going on here. But it would have been easy to keep pumping up the economy, borrowing a lot of money, creating a lot of government jobs. There was no controversy when we're doing all that. But you were going to end up in a calamity. If you go back and look.
That is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. He was talking about, and he said, look, if you go back and look, the economy was humming along right before we had these major recessions and problems. And everyone thought things are going great until it wasn't. And Jen, we were talking earlier about tariffs. We've had Trump officials over the weekend trying to defend his position. There's a lot of frustration. Of course, the markets are tanking still this morning. The futures were down. We had bad days Thursday and Friday. But they're saying, look, there's a reason why we're doing what we're doing. So hang with us. I think the question is, how long can the American people, have this short-term pain?
Yeah, we keep hearing different reasons for this. It's like, well, it's for fairness. It's for bringing back jobs. It's for avoiding a calamity, avoiding a recession. But this is something that Trump has talked about for 40 years. He's promised that throughout the campaign. He's been very transparent about this. And Scott Bessent is like, look, it's like taking your medicine or eating your vegetables. You can't keep juicing up on steroids. That'd be the popular thing to do, but that's not the responsible thing to do. And I hope that the situation is we have smart grown-ups in charge that care about saving our country and not about the politics and getting elected.
And I was listening to some folks, some of the Elon Doge quote-unquote volunteers who were over the weekend who have been working, I think, in the Social Security Administration. And they said, hey, this isn't really political. All we're doing is focusing on the data. We're getting in there. Yeah. We're looking at the numbers and we're focused on the data. And
they have a diehard Democrat on the Team Doge that's just raising the alarm bells about the amount of illegal immigrants that have Social Security payments going to them. And he's like, this is not a partisan thing. This is a problem.
Yeah, that's who I was listening to. And he was also saying, and not only were they given Social Security cards, but then they identified and he said we've only
voted.
We've only looked at a small subset of these folks
in certain states, and they did vote.
And he said over 1,000 in one state voted. And what we know, we're facing a local election here tomorrow. And in some of these local election races,
things can be decided by a handful. And the presidency is decided by a few tens of thousands of votes in a few certain specific places. Ultimately, it can be decided by.
And so I think, yeah, you're right. And I think that's why, I have a lot of respect for what they're doing. And Bessent said the same thing on a different show. He was saying, we're looking at the data.
I like his data. And if we look at data from President Trump's first term, and there's a big study that just came out from a group of economists, mostly at MIT, that showed that a 20% tariff on China led to a 0.7% tax or price level increase over 4 years. I think that's pretty good. If we can take in 20% in tariffs and it's a 0.7% increase, and Kristen, the little publicized.
I think the problem with that, Jen, I took a class in college called, I think, Changing the World Through Data. And one of the books we read in that class was How to Lie with Statistics.
Yeah.
So even data can be manipulated. And there he's talking about, well, we put these tariffs on China and we really didn't have that big of a problem. But I think what a lot of people are saying is that it's different than Trump term one, right? We're putting tariffs on all sorts of different countries like Canada. The car manufacturers are raising alarm bells. I think they're saying this is fundamentally different, and because of the breadth of the tariffs and because of the uncertainty, I think, the way that it's been rolled out.
Well, one thing, Ben Shapiro was livid about this over the weekend, is they're going not just for reciprocity in terms of, okay, you have zero tariffs. If you zero your tariffs out, we'll zero ours out against you. But what we apparently did to Israel was Israel's like, okay, we dropped all of our tariffs down to zero. And the Trump administration still imposed tariffs, saying that because we have a trade deficit with Israel, that we're going to have tariffs on them. But Israel is a much smaller country. And so, of course, there's going to be a deficit. But a trade deficit where we're buying more from them than the other way around is not the same thing as unfair tariffs being lodged against our companies. And so I think Ben Shapiro has a valid point of this is not making sense.
And of course, that's going to be a hot topic of conversation today, John, as BB visits the White House. They're going to have a private meeting and then a joint press conference following that. And tariffs, I think, are on the top of the discussion list.
Yeah, they said the tariffs are on there, the latest strike in Gaza, and even the World Court ruling that the Israelis are guilty of war crimes on the agenda as well.
So we'll have more for you on that tomorrow following that joint press conference, but certainly, and then as well, we will have an update in your morning bell of where the markets are headed. But I think a lot of people are feeling the squeeze right now, Jen, and it's going to be tough. We just had a bad day in Wisconsin, you and I, last week. And, a lot of people are pointing out Trump can do whatever he wants because presumably he does not have a third term. He doesn't have to face the voters. Yet many of these members of Congress, they need to get reelected, and those midterms are creeping up closer and closer. And so now we're starting to see some members of Congress kind of say, maybe all these tariffs aren't a good idea.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough.
Well, I think we need to be patient. Be patient. It's been 5 days since Liberation Day, as it were. Mm-hmm. But Aaron Hedlund from Missouri was in the Rose Garden on that day. It was when we were coming back from Wisconsin, I guess. And be patient. See what he does. He is a deal maker. This is what President Trump is known for. This is what he wrote a book, Art of the Deal, about. He's using our leverage to get a better deal from America, for America. And I, for one, am going to give him the benefit of the doubt and try to exercise a little patience.
All right. I like it. Optimism and pro-Trump talk from Jen this morning.
The master of brinksmanship, they call him.
Let's hope.
Yeah.
Let's hope for all of our sakes and for the sake of our 401ks. All right. Also, we heard a little bit of an update from Brian Hauswirth earlier this morning about some things going on in Boone County, and I think that it raises some larger questions about juror misconduct. Apparently, it was addressed by the judge himself in that there was a juror in a Boone County case that involved St. Louis police officers, and now it's being alleged that essentially she would lied or was, stated a mistruth during her voir dire, right?
Yeah, correct. So it's the case where the one police officer, I think Brian Hauswirth, wanted to come back in and discuss it again, but it's State v. Durbin, where was he a trooper, was accused of sexually assaulting a fellow law enforcement officer at some conference at a hotel here in Boone County, and he was found guilty. But during voir dire, they were asked if they were the potential jurors were members of victim groups, and this juror denied it. But then this motion for a new trial says that it shows on her LinkedIn page and on Facebook that she had worked for one of these groups for 3 years. And the problem that they're going to have there is, he'll have another opportunity to get relief on that because that's ineffective assistance of counsel if you don't Google your jurors to find out basic information about them like that would lead you to not want them on your jury, and to be able to call them out on it during voir dire.
That's what I was thinking, and I don't do any criminal jury trials, but there are people who are like, you hire jury consultants, and sometimes people spend lots and lots.
Not in criminal law. There's no money for it, but
there's a business for people who just do research. But even if you only have an intern, like the first thing is like go to their social media pages and figure out what they're up to, right?
Yeah. I've literally brought in interns because you get the list sometimes like the night before, and you have 100 people on it. You need to Google them all and find out basic information like that. That would be a huge red flag that would stand out if she's part of the victim groups.
Multiple victims groups.
And then the reason you need to do it too is because you don't want to have the whole trial and then have to go back and try to fix something like this. That's why the attorneys, under I think the guidance to our rules, are diligence they advise you need to Google these jurors, and I always do. So it said on our panel person who ended up being the forewoman of the jury, which is a huge deal, on her LinkedIn and her Facebook, she worked for almost 3 years in various capacities at the Violence Project, which is an organization rooting out violence in society. And it also, her personal webpage showed that she worked for an organization to construct their website, the Off Ramp Project, dedicated to training others on violence prevention techniques. and she was a summer file clerk for a law firm for 3 years. And so I don't know if this is specific to sexual violence, this violence project, or not.
I will say this: there's other, by the way, on your question, there's other violence that they address too, but they do address that. She also received a certificate in the issue of workforce development. I was in the courtroom. The Missourian and I were the only two media outlets that I saw in the courtroom. They did a kind of a small story on Friday. The newspaper did. I've got an extensive story up, 939theeagle.com, and I actually, Jen's looking at it, I link to the court filing, which I encourage people, whether they have positions on the case or not, really take a look at this court ruling, because Jen, Counselor Bukowski, it says in here, this is Counselor Dodd saying this, a prospective juror must have, quote, an open mind free from bias and prejudice is what it's saying. And Dodd is essentially arguing this. He's saying that the woman, Juror 18, who is the forewoman of the jury, he is saying she should have disclosed all those things. They ask her about the Me Too movement. They ask her about victim support groups. Did you have any legal background? She was allegedly a clerk for 3 years, and she failed to disclose. So, Stephanie,
they point out this is she's been certified in workplace violence prevention, and this was basically accusation of workplace violence, and didn't disclose that. But the attorney should have seen that on her in their basic research of her bio. If it's on her own, she has her own website that says it. It's on her LinkedIn. It's on her Facebook.
And that would be Counselor Scott Rosenblum's defense team that would have been
wow.
doing. Yes.
Wow. Are you serious?
Mm-hmm.
Rosenblum dropped the ball on that?
Well, it would be his law firm. It was his law firm. But again, part of this too, he did from a defense attorney position, he really hammered away at trying to hammer away at the credibility of the woman about how many beers she had that night, and she couldn't remember, but it was 11 or 12 according to him. She disputed that. But basically, Jen, you're right. They can Google all that, but also...
And you have the most expensive firm for criminal defense in the state, and they didn't Google the jurors?
But that's
ridiculous.
I don't know if they Googled all, but the bottom line is this came out afterwards. But remember that this stuff we're talking about, it's kind of on the honor system. Really, if the prospective juror doesn't volunteer it, that's why
you have the juror research right there, so you can bring that to the judge and disqualify her and get her kicked off right then.
And she ended up being the foreperson. We'll see.
The foreperson, that's big.
Of the jury. So Judge Joshua Calvin Devine's got a case in front of him, and he's going to have to make a decision, and the trooper could get a new trial.
All right. That is the latest from the court system with Brian Hauswirth. All right. Next up, we're going to have John Marsh, and that would be all except for this. John, what's up?
Well, a question for Drake. What is worse than a Lego burglar?
Nothing. Drake says nothing.
This is Wake Up Missouri.
And that would be all. Except for this.
Crush Comics in California's Castro Valley burglarized last month. The thief took a display of the store's most valuable comic books. The owner figured they were gone for good. But 12 hours later, one of his employees stumbled on an eBay listing for a very specific comic book from the store. So the owner got the seller's name and address, searched on Intergram, and also saw the burglar's offer to buy, sell, or trade Lego sets. He got in touch with another comic shop and a toy store that had been broken into, turned their details over to the Alameda County Sheriff's Department, who served a search warrant at the home of Nurula Amiri, where, yes, they found tens of thousands of dollars worth of comic books, collectibles, and rare Lego sets, including Drake, Cafe Corner, the Star Wars Imperial Star Destroyer, and, yes, the original Millennium Falcon Lego set. And now you know the rest of that story.
I was going to say, tens of thousands of dollars. That's what, like 5 Lego sets these days?
Yeah, if that.
If you're looking for a Lego, Drake's got some on his desk, by the way.
Don't display that. I mean, I don't want people breaking into my apartment or the Zimmer office to steal my Legos. I'd be mad.
You're an aficionado. Do you have a favorite set?
Ooh, so I have a favorite lineup, and that's the modular lineup. So it's like could be from $200 to $300 per set, and they're like huge buildings that are minifigure scale. And like I have a hotel and a natural history museum, a little jazz cafe, and there's a lot of them like that. They've been coming out since 2007, I want to say, and they've had one every year, and it's like kind of started the whole adult lineup.
Wasn't there one
I did the
time?
White House. It was cute.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
Wasn't there a solid gold C-3PO or something they did one time Lego set?
We've got several of those like big fancy sets. The problem is you buy them and they're like $100, and my son's got them put together by the next day. And so what? Then they just sit there, right?
Yeah,
like,
and gather dust.
I know. It's a tough thing for me. And so it amazes me because the other thing I've been seeing, I mean, there's so many pop-up. I don't remember seeing as many pop-up like Lego stores. They're like internationally, they're standalone. I would say like airports have Lego stores now. I mean, they're everywhere. And they're making more money than they ever have.
Yeah. Well, they have like the paintings now, like the Van Gogh, and they have flowers. So yeah, they have found an adult audience, or maybe it's like the kids that grew up doing Legos are now still interested in doing them. They're relaxing. It's like a puzzle.
I guess. I'm not really.
All started in Denmark back in before World War II, I think, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And they actually had in the early 2000s, they were about to go out of business because they kept on like trying to, you know how toys, like they made merch, like they had backpacks, they had hoodies, they started making all this other stuff. And eventually, I think it was around 2010, they ended up just deciding we're only going to make Legos now. And that's it. And they have been doing a really good job on that.
Well, I'm thinking
they also like started licensing, like getting the movies and the, instead of just being a building block set, if they got all the themed ones from popular movies, characters, scenes, now buildings.
That's right. I'm thinking these people in St. Louis might want to remove a sign I saw this weekend, which caught my attention because it was the size of like the no parking signs, and it was on like an official metal pole, and all that was on the top of the sign was a cartoon picture, and it just said comics with an arrow. And I'm thinking, can you put up official like road signs that just like point to your store? That seems weird, right, John?
Sounds like something from Route 66 back in the day.
It was in St. Louis suburbs. I don't know what the rules are there. We do need to talk about the rules at some point about whether dumpster diving is legal in Missouri and a new ordinance Rolla has. But up next, Boone County Clerk Brianna Lennon.
Broadcasting live from the Zimmer Communications World Headquarters. This is Wake Up Missouri with Stephanie Bell, the Zimmer News Team, and your host, Randy Tobler.
This is Stephanie Bell sitting in for Randy Tobler this morning. He will return tomorrow. I am joined by guest co-host and host of the Jennifer Bukowski Show, which airs on Sundays on the Eagle, Jennifer Bukowski.
10 to noon. Good morning.
Good morning, Jen. Well, we are hoping to be joined by Brianna Lennon, Boone County Clerk, here shortly. We are hearing voter turnout for the spring election is going to be up quite high. I know Brian has been talking with her, and I know around the state we are expecting increased turnout. Now, part of that might be due to the no excuse absentee rules, which I think really influenced a lot of people to vote early in the fall. And we're seeing quite a few people cast their votes early this cycle. Yeah,
no doubt about it. In Boone County, and I can't speak for specifically Cole and Greene, Don and John can chime in on that, but for Boone County, they're looking at about a 25% voter turnout. And there's a lot of issues on the ballot in Boone County, a lot of issues across the state. The big issue in Boone County is the Columbia mayoral race. Enough so, Jennifer was there. The Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, urged conservatives to not just vote on Tuesday, but also to get their family and friends to the polls as well. There's also a huge mayoral election in St. Louis. Tashara Jones.
Oh, yeah, big one.
She may get beat. I mean,
it looks like it.
By challenger Kara Spencer.
Yep. And, so we'll see. And also, it is interesting, too, the mayor of Kansas City, Quentin Lucas, who's in, and John knows this, he's in Jefferson City and certainly in Columbia more than I think people realize. I've seen him in the Bob Evans eating. He likes to go there to eat. He is endorsed the mayor of Columbia, Barbara Buffalo, in the mayoral race, Quentin Lucas, because I have a mailer, and Quentin Lucas his endorsed it. I get a lot of mailers from all the candidates, all of them. And that's interesting. And also, Tashara Jones, Jennifer, has endorsed the mayor of Columbia as well. So it is, I guess, because they work together and whatever. Blair Murphy continues to focus on the issue of crime.
And has chalked up some big endorsements of his own.
Huge. I mean, you're talking, I think, the two biggest ones, and there's a lot of them. The two biggest ones to me would be the sheriff of Boone County, Dwayne Carey, who is a Democrat.
But my favorite local Democrat.
Yeah, he's kind of an old school Democrat. He's endorsed Blair Murphy. His big issue is public safety as well. And there's a lot of other big endorsements, a lot of other big names in terms of Blair Murphy, but probably none bigger than the Mizzou football coach, Eli Drinkwitz, is supporting Blair Murphy and has donated to his campaign as well. So that said, Barbara Buffalo has a number of endorsements as well, and I think
mayor's race in Springfield too. We can't forget about with Ken McClure being term limited.
Yeah, and I just don't. And Don, I'd have to chime in on what's going to happen. I mean, McClure has just been the kind of the face of Springfield politics for a long time. It'll be interesting to see, but the crime's the big issue. Eli Drinkwitz is endorsed, but I think a lot of it will depend on turnout tomorrow as well.
That's right. Well, let's bring her in now, Brianna Lennon, clerk of Boone County, to talk about expected turnout. What are we expecting for tomorrow, Brianna?
Hey, I think that we are probably in the 25% range. That's pretty average for a local election, even with the number of issues that are on the ballot. And obviously, the city of Columbia has a pretty contentious race going on. And then we've also got Boone County Fire Protection District and the rest of the county. But 25% is most likely what we're looking at.
Now, you also have some numbers on early absentee voting. We've got the 2 weeks no excuse absentee. What are those looking like compared to what we've seen, like what we saw in November?
Yeah, so we're not going to be breaking any November records for sure. It was incredibly popular in November, and we had like a third of our overall turnout was absentee voters. But we have had a lot of people utilizing no excuse absentee voting. For the 2 weeks since we've had that, we've had close to 3,000 people that have voted in person already. Over the weekend, we actually had 600 people total. So we're at almost 3% turnout just with absentee voting alone. So I think it's not really an indication that, oh my gosh, there's going to be a ton of turnout on election day. It's more of an indication that people took advantage of it in November, really like that it was available and are using it now. But I think it's fantastic that so many people have already cast their ballot.
Again, Boone County Clerk Brianna Lennon is our guest. She is live with us here on Wake Up Missouri. You've heard her. She says about 3,000 people in Boone County have already cast no excuse absentee ballots, including 600 this weekend. Brianna, I was one of those 600 and cast it, and your staff did a great job at the Boone County Government Center, and they always do. One issue that I think is worth mentioning, and this affects our voters that are listening to us on KWTO in Springfield and KWS in Jeff City and all over the state, including 93.9 The Eagle, but I want to really emphasize this because you have it in your reminder that you send out to the voters, and that is the fact that it's a photo ID, and this is not the time to debate whether or not we like photo ID. It is the law of the land, and you point out to people, at least it is right now, you point out to voters you need to show a photo ID issued by the state or federal government tomorrow when you vote, or if you come in to vote absentee today. Tell our listeners who haven't voted yet, what can they bring? What is acceptable under this photo ID?
Yeah, absolutely. So 99% of the time people are bringing their Missouri driver's license. That's a perfectly acceptable form of ID, Missouri driver's license or Missouri non-driver's license. If it is expired, it has to have expired after the November 2024 election. So if it just recently expired last week, you can still use that. That's perfectly fine. If you don't have a Missouri-issued driver's license or non-driver's license, you can bring a U.S. passport. You can bring a federally issued military ID. All of those are perfectly fine. And the other thing that happens with absentee voting that we've had to kind of remind people and educate people on is if you don't have one of those forms of identification, on Election Day, you can still vote a blue provisional ballot. That will come back to our office. We'll compare the signature on the envelope to the signature on your voter record and then determine if it can be counted. But that avenue is not available during absentee voting. So we've had some people that have come that have had, they've just moved here in the past couple months. They still have their out-of-state driver's license. They don't have the opportunity to absentee vote. They have to wait till Election Day and vote a provisional ballot. It takes a little bit extra time, so we do warn people, if you're going to do that, just be aware that you're going to fill out the ballot, but you're also going to fill out the provisional ballot envelope. But if you've got a Missouri driver's license, a U.S. passport, all those are perfectly fine. Make sure you bring it with you on Election Day.
Now, Jen was telling us earlier today that there was a bill in the House that got perfected that would extend that 2-week no excuse absentee voting window back to 6 weeks. And we were wondering, I know you talked
6 weeks. It wasn't 6 weeks before.
Okay, 6 weeks. So I know you talk to and stay in touch with the clerks across the state. Is that something that the clerks are weighing in on? And what's the implications of having a 6-week absentee window?
Yeah, I think that is something that the clerks across the state would be very welcoming of. And the biggest reason for that is we saw what happened in the November election where a lot of people wanted to use it. And the thought was, it was very crowded. A lot of people wanted to do it, so there were a lot of lines. And just from like a planning and logistics standpoint, we would love to have that spread out over a longer period of time so we're not smushing everybody into that 2-week period of time. So having it to 6 weeks, the other thing it helps for is kind of clarity of voter education. It's hard to explain to people, yes, that absentee voting is available for 6 weeks, but only 2 of them are available for no reason, having no excuse reasons. So it is part of a bill that also brings back the presidential preference primary, which I think is a little more, clerks have a little more varied opinions on that. I personally think that it would be perfectly fine. And if we bring back that bill and have all of those things, I'm hoping to see those kinds of changes get passed. But I think really what it's about is just making sure that it's easier for voters to understand. It's easier for voters to be able to take advantage of it without having to smush it into that 2-week period of time.
Brianna, do you still get comments from voters out there or try to point fingers and say, well, voter fraud and all? I know that was an issue during your campaign with Taylor Burks. At least the implication of that. Do you even hear that anymore?
It's most of the time what we hear from voters are just questions about how they can either vote, like what do they need to vote, and then how do we make sure that everything is safe and that there's integrity in our voter list. We talk a lot about voter list maintenance and how we make sure that the voter roll is clean. We talk a lot about how we test our equipment, how we go through the certification process after Election Day. So I think what we've seen in the last few years is so many elections has become so much more of a top of mind concern for a lot of people, and election integrity comes up a lot more often. Is we're trying to pull the curtain back a lot more. Not everybody knows how elections are run. We try to bring more people in by serving as election judges, and I think that's been a great way to both like show people how elections operate and how many steps and protocols and checks and balances are involved, but also to let people know that they can kind of educate their friends too. Once they learn about how the process works, go out and talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, get them involved as well.
Now, I know over the weekend you had several sites, both on, you had 3 sites on Saturday and 1 on Sunday where people could go do their no excuse in-person absentee voting. I, for one, appreciate that because I can vote right there in Ashland, Missouri. But I know there are folks out there who don't have those opportunities. Is setting up these satellite sites, is it completely within the discretion of the clerk? And like, what limitations are there? And if folks are saying, I'd like to be able to vote at my public library on a Saturday, I mean, what should they do? Should they call their clerk and say, we want you to do this?
Yeah, I mean, not to throw my colleagues under the bus, but it is something that is within the discretion. We've seen a lot of the larger counties. Greene County has multiple locations. St. Charles has multiple locations. It helps not only to make it convenient for voters to bring it to places where people already are, but I think it's also a really great way to kind of build that community and get people aware that an election is coming up. So, yeah, reach out to your county clerk. Ask them about if they're interested in doing other options. I would be happy. You can always tell them to call Boone County, and we'd be happy to talk to them about how we do it here.
Well, we certainly know that you have a lot on your plate right now and a busy day tomorrow, and we appreciate you joining us and appreciate your service to Boone County and beyond.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
Thank you, Brianna. I would just add this. Jen mentioned the bill that would extend that at the Boone County Courthouse in November. It was so packed in there, and Dr. Tobler and I were there, and we had people literally almost passing out. One elderly woman got dehydrated. Several had to go outside to get air. It was too crowded, and that would be good to space them out. There was no water. There was no water down there for anybody to drink. So that's something I know they're going to try to address in the next big election.
We will see. That bill will head over to the Senate at some point. Up next, we are going to do your morning bell and get a full rundown of, I can't say it's going to be good news, Jen, but we will have the latest on the markets for you next on Wake Up Missouri.
You're listening
time for your morning bell. As we look at the market close on Friday, it was a complete bloodbath. The Dow was down 5.5, NASDAQ down 5.82%, S&P down 5.97%. We are wiping out years of growth, Jen, and it is really nasty.
But it's the same levels like it was in 21.
That's true, and everyone's saying we weren't freaking out then, so why are we freaking out now? But we also aren't like in the midst of a global pandemic, I guess. I don't know. And Trump was here to save us, so I'm feeling stressed about it.
Well, I think if you just listen to Bissent, he's very smart. Things were artificially high. These stocks were juiced up, and this is just like the medicine we have to take to like make our economy strong instead of like a bodybuilder that's on steroids, like that's dying internally. These are things that we have to do to be healthy for the long run.
All right. Well, the sectors on Friday, everybody was in the red pretty significantly. Energy leading the way at 8.7% down. The best performer was consumer discretionary at only 4.5% down. So as we look toward the futures this morning, everything is still in the red, more than kind of hovering between 2.5% and 3% down this morning. Now, I have some sad news, especially it's kind of a running joke, John. I think roll carts are to Columbia as Olive Garden is to Jefferson City. For years, if you follow the Jefferson City Facebook pages, people they really, really want an Olive Garden. But
they do. Oh,
yeah, it's been a running joke.
So it's like our Trader Joe's.
Yes,
or our Chick-fil-A before we got one.
But Columbia's getting a Trader Joe's.
I know. I'm so excited.
So it is. It's something people just can't help themselves to talk about. But I have some bad news.
Sort of like Trump talking about the trade deficit with China. Same kind of debate.
Or fixing tariffs for the last 40 years. He's been talking about that. We're getting ripped off.
But maybe bad news, good news in that Jefferson City, you already have the top casual dining restaurant sitting here today. Texas Roadhouse, for the first time in 7 years, has unseated Olive Garden as the top casual dining restaurant. They have seen a recent resurgence, and Olive Garden is no longer amongst the top. Other folks in the list, Chili's, Applebee's, and Buffalo Wild Wings. Olive Garden has held that title since 2018, but is now officially no longer the champion. Apparently, Texas Roadhouse saw a 14.7% increase in sales, pulling in $5.5 billion. That's like a lot of rolls. What do they serve? Like honey butter with their bread? It's pretty good.
Peanuts.
Oh, yeah.
That you can no longer drop on the floor after the pandemic.
And Olive Garden saw just a 0.8% increase in sales. Do you think it has to? I mean,
my nephew and his friends went there and ate like a record number of roll challenge.
Really?
Like 23 was the winner. Gross. So, yeah, teenage boys, right?
And you might say like, well, is Texas Roadhouse cheaper than Olive Garden? It's not, though. I mean, it's not like it's not people
it's a steakhouse.
It's expensive. Yeah. So, interesting.
I think Longhorn, that might be one of the best meals in town. I don't know.
Yes, it's very good.
That one's good too.
So I think for folks in Jefferson City, knowing that you have the top casual dining spot already, you don't need a stinking Olive Garden now that they're number 2, right? But just some interesting business news for you this morning. Jen, we have to go.
And we still in Columbia enjoy a Red Lobster. A lot of people in the country lost theirs.
Wah, wah. Well, the one in Jefferson City suffered a fire.
That's the cheddar biscuits I love.
Yeah. Well, up next, we got to talk about this billiards championship, women's billiards up next.
I think just low.
Tobler this morning. He will be back tomorrow, joined by Jennifer Bukowski. And the men and girls sports debate is heating back up. Listen to this testimony given in the California State Assembly by a high school student.
My name is Taylor Starling. I'm 16 years old and I attend Martin Luther King High School. I have a 4.0 GPA, serve as vice president of my junior class, and volunteer with National Women's Charity League, and lead as captain of my school's cross-country and track and field teams. I was removed from my varsity girls team and replaced by a newly eligible male transfer student who received favorable treatment. I worked every day during summer with my team and into the school year 6 days a week, waking up at 5 a.m. to attend morning practices and staying at school until 4:45 each day. My goal was to attain a varsity spot on my school's Division I CIF team. Not an easy feat, but one I accomplished. Since the start of the season in August, I ran in every varsity race. In late October, the male transfer student was given my spot after not being held to the same strict team requirements as me and the rest of the girls.
That, I get choked up listening to that.
Oh my, this is the exact scenario that I've described before because I was in her same circumstance where I was 7 on my cross-country team. We had an excellent cross-country team at Parkway West High School. And so it's not just like the Riley Gaines is the number ones in the world. Yeah, we had to get up during the summer, 5 in the morning for practices or after school, staying for hours, running 10 miles sometimes, doing weights, doing all this. It was exhausting, doing swim practice, all this for strength building. It was tough. It was exhausting to fight for that 7th spot. And I've been saying this whole time, if some guy they let on the team, I would quit, because you're not going to be able to get your spot back. If there's a dude holding the spot ahead of you, it would make me frustrated and make me want to quit. And here, this girl, she was the captain of her team. That's incredible. I wasn't the captain of my team, but for her to get ousted by a male is so wrong, and I'm so fed up with it. We have last night 2 men faced each other for the women's championship title at the Ultimate Pool Women's Pro Series event in Wigan, United Kingdom.
You mean Harriet and Lucy?
Yeah, they're both dudes and pretending to be girls, and now it's finally come to it. These dudes that are masquerading are actually ousting all the women from women's sports, and we saw 2 instances last week with fencing and with frisbee. Was it frisbee golf? Yeah, I guess where the woman took a knee and refused to play. That's what's going to have to happen.
They're going to have to do that now.
But how is that high school girl going to be able to do that if she refuses to play? The cross country team will continue on because it's not an opponent situation.
Yeah, but she's personally victimized by that. I mean, I think any parent with kids in sports, especially if you're right on the cusp, I think, I've been in that situation where you're just hoping your kid makes the team, and then you think about, the camaraderie and the team building and the things they learn, even if they ride the bench the whole season. Yeah. Just making the team can be a make or break for some kids.
Well, especially when you talk about team sports like cross country and track, where you've got the individual competition on one side and then you've got the team competition on the other. And then you end up with a kid like this girl who was a team captain. Taken out of the mix.
I was fighting for my 7th spot. Depending on how you do each week, you might be 8, you might be 7. But if all of a sudden a boy has bumped you down, then you're not going to get back up onto the varsity and compete in the varsity.
Now, I do have a question about pool playing and billiards. I guess, do men have an inherent advantage in pool playing? Because I get it in track and football and, and basketball,
being taller
volleyball.
Would help.
Being taller? Well, that's true because you have, more reach, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe, can you hit the ball harder?
Sure, if you're a dude. I don't know if that matters in pool.
Some of the best pool shooters I've known have been women, so
I've never been very good. It used to be a thing where when we grew up, everyone had a pool table in their basement. That was where you wanted to hang out. Do people play pool now?
Oh my gosh. Whenever I used to go to my aunt's Christmas and all that, we'd all hang out in the pool table room and we'd all just play pool the entire time. The people who aren't playing pool go drink and sit in the cards table right next to us. Now that I'm thinking about it, we might have a gambling family, but the pool is a thing that I love. We have it at the student center.
Yeah, my brother is 16 years younger than me. He played a ton at Mizzou. He got really good.
Yeah,
they have it at Brady. They have it several places.
See, the dying bar game that I am so sad, it's very hard to find. But if you know of a place that has it, let me know. Because the one that I love, shuffleboard. I think that
eats
is
up so much space. That's one of the problems with it.
So fun though, and
if you have the bowling half-court shuffleboard, kitty cat shuffleboard, with the pins on it, that's a good
There
one.
used to be lots of places with it, and now it's kind of like a dying brand. It's really hard to find like a bar with shuffleboard. I know of a couple, but if I ever have a basement big enough and space for it, that's what's going in my basement.
That's funny because we extended like our basement for a shuffleboard table and eventually got rid of it anyways because it just eats up the entire room. Like it was supposed to be a storage area and we just eliminated the storage area to accommodate the stupid shuffleboard table. But
then you ended up
so
with that sand everywhere, right?
You can't fit the furniture in because you have to have standing room around the thing. It's just like it's not a practical item to have in a house.
Yeah, right now.
They're messy.
Yeah, I have a Papa-Shot machine eating up most of the area of my basement, which now
those
no
are
one
hard
plays.
to fit in too, aren't they?
Yes.
We have right now we're on a pinball and a Ms. Pac-Man.
Ooh, that's fun.
And we could squeeze those two together so those fit, but we can't add anything else now.
Well, a Nintendo Switch 2 you could.
Oh yeah, those things are compact.
Which you told us earlier, because of the tariffs, they're now delaying the pre-order and delivery of them.
Yeah, I just went on the website. So we're supposed to be able to start pre-ordering on Wednesday, but they've announced that's not going to be opened up. So you can send them an email to let you know when more information will be available. But don't worry, they're definitely planning on selling those things to Americans.
Yeah.
They just are probably reconsidering the price if it's still going to be $450 or not.
Yeah, Drake was saying $450 to $500 for a Nintendo Switch. I'm out of the game console world right now, but for $500,
that's not much. That's not that bad.
How much are the big consoles?
Those are more.
Oh.
Yeah, they can go up to $800. I want to say for the best of the best, but I mean even a PS5 is usually $600. But the Switch, I mean, what appealed to it is that you can get a $200 Switch that you can't dock and give it to your kid, the Switch Lite. But yeah, the price is going to be a big stickler. It's starting to look a lot more like the newer consoles.
That's what I really liked about it. It was so versatile in that it reminds me of an old Game Boy.
Take it on the trip, if you're
in the car.
Take it on the road, take it on a trip, and pop it up, and then you can have it and play it as a group with the family. There's a lot of different family-friendly games on it. Yeah, I'm a fan of Nintendo.
You're a fan of all games.
OG.
You're kind of a gamer, Jen.
Yeah, I do spend too much time playing video games my kids get me hooked on.
But your real sport is pickleball. That's your true love. Have men infiltrated the women's pickleball league?
Funny you should ask. Yes, there was a trans woman or a man playing in the Show Me State games last year.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, really?
Our pro from our country club objected and said, I have female players here that signed up for a female tournament. It wasn't, I played in it too, but I wasn't in the senior one, which is 50 and up. This person was filming themselves playing. It was strange, but I wonder, if I'm confronted like that fencer, if I get seated against that person, I've decided I'm not going to play him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Jen's going to take a knee. You heard it here
I'm going to have
first.
Stephanie Bell up there filming it. Brian Hauswirth can report. I'm just kidding.
I wonder what the rules around the Show Me State games allow trans athletes to compete then.
Well, apparently that's what that our pro was told, but the people at the booth were flustered. They're like, it's okay. He's like, well, you say it's okay, but I have female players signed up for a female tournament, and there's a man in it.
Yeah, and and pickleball is one where strength and speed really
this person
matters.
Is tall.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's frustrating.
It's crazy. I was up in St. Louis this weekend, and I know they have specific centers, and I know we just got one in here, South Columbia, of places that are just designed for fun and pickleball, and they're adding pickleball courts where you would normally see volleyball courts or just a patio. Lots
because
of restaurants
it's the best, fastest growing sport in America for a reason.
Oh yeah. Well, and we have some professionals basically here in mid-Missouri as well, right?
Yeah, Dylan Frazier was ranked #1 in the world at men's doubles last year, but now he's slid down in the rankings a little bit, but he's a superstar in the sport.
And didn't you win the Show Me State games last year?
No, nope.
You didn't?
No, nowhere close.
Okay.
But I'm getting better, so maybe I'll represent a little better, bring a little more heat this year.
All right. I will love to see that. Well,
unless you have to go up against a 225-pound guy across the net from you, right?
Then I'll be posting that on my Twitter at ESQ on fire.
Yeah, make sure you follow Jen. She's a good follow. She's keeping you up to date on all things. And make sure you tune in tomorrow because you'll be on Gary Nolan.
10:30.
Awesome. All right. Well, up next, we are going to get to our leftover fridge. I've got some cool graphs that we haven't talked about yet, and we've got some additional happenings in the State House. That's up next on Wake Up Missouri. If you missed the half-naked picture of producer Drake at the
who needs self-tanner, maybe.
yeah, Jen and I are going to have to get you on a self-tanning routine from the softball game. We're going to post that to the Facebook page later so you can catch up. Unfortunately, they had a loss this weekend, but they are headed back into play on Wednesday, so we will be rooting for them. John, what's in your leftovers?
Well, we've talked about the mayor's race in Columbia, the mayor's race in Springfield, and for Jefferson City, Cole County voters, not a whole lot on the ballot. There are a couple council races to be decided tomorrow. Julie Allen and Kathy Harness in the city's Ward 4, and Erica Choinka and Derek Thomas in the city's 3rd Ward, and a bunch of school bond issues out in the county. But it's one of those deals where we heard Brianna Lennon, Boone County clerk, talking about a 25% turnout. We're hearing from Steve Korsmeyer, the Cole County clerk, be lucky to see 10% at the polls.
Get out and vote. You can vote early absentee today, no excuse. Check your clerk's office website for more information. And, of course, you can vote tomorrow. Jen has other good Tigers sports announcements.
Yes, so Missouri Gymnastics has advanced to the national championships for the second time in 4 years. Mizzou Gymnastics advanced after finishing second in the Seattle Regional Final on Sunday. So it's that's exciting. We've got an excellent gymnastics program. Go Tigers.
It's incredible. Every year I put a reminder on my calendar to go check their schedule because they only have a couple of meets at home, but it's relatively, like, if you have a family, even if you want to go by yourself, it's relatively inexpensive to get in. And they do all the cool things with like tunnels and lights, and it's just very exciting. And then you watch these women and it looks like you're watching the Olympics. I mean, they are so incredibly talented. And when you go to Hearns, the seats are so close. You feel like you're right up in on the action.
Cat Classic is something to see if you've never done it before, and take the family. It's pretty cool.
It is very exciting. Now, I saw 2 graphs over the weekend that really caught my eye. We've been talking this morning a lot, and we're going to continue to talk about it, about tariffs. And this chart really surprised me. It's from Visual Capitalist, and they are it's a map of the United States, and they're calling it the U.S. import dependence on China by state. Now, take yourself back to the August primary in Missouri, right? And how much did you hear about China in Missouri, right? Like everyone loved China. Everyone hated, if they were your opponent, they were a China lover.
Oh, yeah. Everyone got attacked over China.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was in every political race. We had all of these ads about they were selling your farmland to China, or somehow they're like a China apologist.
It's better than the Wisconsin State Supreme Court. It was all about pedophiles.
That's right.
All of their attack ads. I'd rather hear about China than pedophiles if you're going to have to hear all those ads.
Well, with all of the talk about China, I guess I was a little bit surprised. So they mapped all of the states and put a percent of your share of imports from China, with it looks like Montana being the very lowest at just 1% of their imports come from China. And so that they went from light blue all the way to red being bad. And let me tell you, Missouri is bright red with 17%. Share of imports from China. And that's on the high side. I think the highest in looking at it is Nevada at 26%, California at 25%. Those are unsurprising. Missouri joins Tennessee, Wisconsin, Minnesota, some other states at 17%, but a lot of states are doing better than us as far as our reliance on China.
That must be like manufacturing and stuff, because otherwise, I'm sure, why would Montana be importing less crap on Amazon from China than us? Like, it must be related to industry.
We probably
wonder if it's car plants, some of the car plants in the state, maybe in importing Chinese parts for some of the vehicles, maybe?
That could be, and the chart does specifically say that China made up 41% of all U.S. consumer electronics imports. So electronics apparently is a big one where we might see that number tick up. But we will dig into that. The other one I saw, this article from Committee to Unleash Prosperity, they ask the question, where have all the children gone? To red counties.
Good.
And right, I think I have suggested here, that if more Republicans just, had bigger families, we'd be doing better in the elections. And I think, we talk about family values and big families, but really the data is bearing that out. We've been talking a lot about data this morning, but they graphed the fertility rate by percent of Republican vote. and it very clearly ticks up and goes from blue to red counties. And they're saying the relationship is getting stronger. From the report, it says the relationship between voting Republican and having more babies is growing stronger over time. In 2012, a 10% increase in votes for Romney within a county saw an expected increase of 0.05 in the total fertility rate compared to 0.09 in 2024. That means in the past 12 years, the geographic relationship between voting Republican and having more babies has grown by 85%. It's pretty wild.
But it's still less than half a point.
But do you think, and then you have to kind of think, like, is it like, people that are fleeing blue areas, do you already have kind of a big family and you're moving to a Republican county because you're sick and tired of, the policies and where you live? I mean, I think people are self-segregating a little bit politically.
Yeah. And Democrats tend to be younger and then switch. And I don't know. Yeah.
Well, then you hear the national outlets saying, "Oh, we've talked to liberal young people, and they're saying I'm not going to bring a child into this world because
it's too scary.
Yeah,
it's too scary."
They do say that.
All right. Well, we will get to more data for you tomorrow and the latest news. Of course, we'll have an update on that meeting between Trump and Bibi Netanyahu today. And we'll have the latest, of course, on the markets. That will be tomorrow on Wake Up Missouri.